How you doing there, Chuck? Looks like we're gonna finally get started tonight, huh? How's your week been, Chuck?
Oh, my week has been fantastic. My club's opening back up, and so I'm getting back to. I'm getting busy again. So
All
I guess I get used to staying up all night,
right, now
being
shout
around
out to
happy people.
look, shout out to Cafe Instable.
Thank you, Lex.
So we're talking about accountability tonight, Chuck. What you think about that?
Did you ask me a question, Lex?
I did. I said we're talking about accountability tonight. So what you think about that?
Oh, I think accountability is extremely important. But I think as we have this discussion, one of the things we're going to have to do is to remember that, I think sometimes when we talk about accountability, we speak as if it's like a one size fit all, right? That we all have the capacity to do the exact same thing, right?
Actually, no, we actually don't.
But if we consider
I think we have a little bit of communications. Probably maybe the weather airways or something, but we can see you, Chuck, but you're a little frozen. So we're gonna pick up from there so we don't lose it. We can see you, Chuck, but we're not hearing what you're saying. So we're talking on the issue of accountability, and you were talking about a one size fit all kind of glove. I don't think that is what we have in accountability. I think there are different levels to it. Definitely, we have different accountability issues when we're talking about our communities. There's certain phases of accountability that we have to adjust to. Everybody isn't accountable to certain things, and some people are accountable to everything. Um, when we're talking about accountability, we're talking about where we start off with this. We have to kind of go back to the roots of who we are and where we are in this. For years in our communities, we've had the loss of jobs, inadequacy in housing, education opportunities, inequality in healthcare, and it's hurt our communities extremely hard. We've of course had some highs, we've had some positives, but the positives and highs don't outweigh what we're dealing with on a normal basis in our everyday life in our communities. Um, we have people that we send in office. We have people that are in higher standards in our communities, leaders, clergies, that we do hold accountable to a certain level more than our average everyday citizens. Not every citizen actually has the ability to be held accountable for things that are happening to their own communities. I know we hear it a lot. People like to put out the fact that our crime levels are black on black crime, which is not even something that is even a word. It's a verbiage, it's a rhetoric that's kind of been pushed along throughout the years, kind of saying there's actually such a thing as black on black crime. There is not a thing, just like there's not white on white crime, Asian on Asian crime. It's crime. How do we get to this point in our community where our crime levels are so high? Well, let's take a look in our neighborhoods. We used to have neighborhood schools. We don't have them anymore. We now have kids that are waking up at 5:30 in the morning being bused across town to schools that are not in their community, that are substandard, that testing is an issue in them. We're putting more emphasis on testing than we are in education. We're giving too much to our teachers. Our teachers are overwhelmed and underpaid. We're asking teachers to be counselors, to be mothers, fathers, nutritionists. Um, there's just so much accountability for teachers, and we're not paying them for that. We're putting accountability on students to be able to bear the brunt of their own education. And I'm not discounting the parents' participation. What I'm saying is we're putting a lot on the students to be able to wake up in the morning, get their nutritious meal, head out to a bus that they may have to get out at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and be at school. Sometimes with clothing that's inadequate, it's cold outside, these kids are freezing. We're throwing all this out because when we talk about accountability, Chuck, one of the things you said is that it's not a one size fit all, and it's not. Some of the things I've just thrown out there is just kind of a verbiage. We go from elected officials to all the way down to parents, to students, to teachers, to police officers, to civic leaders, to clergy, to our own selves. We all have a certain responsibility and accountability that we're not living up to, self included. We have to kind of take a step back and see what we're not doing in our communities and what we could be doing more of in our communities. A lot of times we take a stand when something happens. We jump on trends, we jump on being popular. We've turned being an elected official into almost a stardom, like a rock star. We're putting people on pedestals, and when they fall, we're shunning them down because, of course, we've placed them so high that these people are now in an accountability zone where we're fearing that they're not going to be held. We're to the level that they're not. Hey, Chuck, you're back. Good to see you.
I'm back. All right.
I don't know if you've been here, but I've been just talking about some different levels. We left off and you were saying about the one size fit all, and I would say no, it doesn't. Like accountability is not a one size fit all glove at all. I'm gonna let you take back up where you left off.
Right. Yeah, I was saying that I mean, different people have the capacity to do different things. This one thing I always think of, Lex. I was in Chicago, right? We talk about accountability, and me and one of my older friends. I mean, he was a poet, a tremendous poet, a beautiful brother too. I love the guy. I learned so much from him. His name's Kent Foreman. But he's one of them old. He was one of them older brothers, old school, and he had a lot of room for foolishness. And so we were eating in an Asian restaurant. I still remember, and a homeless guy came in the restaurant where we were eating and asked him a question, and he was so offended by that, and he was like, "Man, not while I'm eating, right?" And so for him, he was like, dude, I appreciate that. I don't appreciate that you're homeless, but I respect that. And I know you need help, but I'm eating right now and I ain't got time for this. But even though I was a lot younger at the time, in my mind, I'm saying that guy is homeless and he doesn't care if you feel like your dinner has been ruined or if your conversation has been interrupted. You know what I'm saying? He's homeless. He doesn't care. So in some ways, I'm not making excuses for a homeless man who might walk in a restaurant and ask you for something. I guess that would annoy most of us. But in reality, if we put ourselves in his shoes, we could see that his reality is different from ours, right? And so I use that as an example to show that if when you're dealing with people who are living in a sort of desperate kind of place, right? We can't expect them to be able to contribute on the same level as a person who's living in a comfortable space. He knows where you know that the mortgage is going to be paid, the kids are going to be in good schools, everybody's going to eat, and you get to take a vacation or two during the year. We just won't be able to expect the same sort of accountability. And I don't know. I think that a lot of people will hear me say that and say, "Man, this dude's just making excuses for somebody." But I don't believe that. I think that different people have different responsibilities, and some of us can do more than others. What do you think about that, Lex?
It's not an excuse at all. You're actually saying exactly what I've been trying to say to people is that we all, self included, have accountability on different levels. And we have to be accountable to our own actions and inactions, if that's kind of what we're saying. We don't have, many of us don't have the privilege. For instance, we have some teens, okay? And a lot of times I get so annoyed with people when they start to say, "Oh, these kids out here, they're wilding out." they don't have this, they know the parents aren't doing this, they don't have responsibility, they don't, and we don't ever stop to look at the root of what's actually going on with these kids. At the onset, we may see a kid. I'm just going to use for example. We have a kid in our program who's 6'5", 268 pounds. He's 14 years old. But if you see him out or just come across him, he looks like a grown man. So when people see him, and the first thing they see, if he's outside and he's walking around the neighborhood, he's even been asked, "Where you going? You ain't got no job. Why aren't you doing such and such?" He doesn't have the necessary shoes or clothing. Is, well, why you don't have a job so you could, pay for that? Your parents can't take care of everything. You need to do this, do that, do this, do that. And these are from people who are in a position to say those sort of things, getting in their cars, their comfortable cars, and driving off and going to their comfortable homes, not knowing that this young man is out there cutting grass, cleaning cars, doing whatever he can do in order to just be able to afford just basic school necessities. And people will say, oh, well, there's food drives and clothing drives and school drives all over the place, and he can get the necessities that he needs. Well, yes, we normally do have school drives at the beginning of the year, right? And just since COVID's happened, we just need to stop fascinating about the fact that we've been doing this for a long time. We haven't in communities. COVID has unveiled the ugliness of our communities and the fact that we have been turning a blind eye to what has actually been happening in our own communities. Children that have not been fed, families that are out on the streets, not by choice. We have families that are being evicted from landlords. And listen, I'm not going to take away from landlords. I know they got to get their payment, but we also know that there's also things that are put into place for some of these landlords to be able to receive funding or to get some kind of break. So they could pass that along to these people who are in predicaments right now, who are without jobs or having some type of issues that they can't pay their rents. And what's happening is they're being put out on the streets. So when I'm talking about accountability, I'm talking about who, what, when, where, and why. Where do we get to the point that we're not, as people that are, I call it as a privilege. A privilege, I'm not talking about white or black privilege, I'm talking about class privilege. When we're at a point that we're able to do a little more than maybe the next person can do, what is stopping us from doing that? Do we need to have an applause? Do we need to have a camera that's following us around to show what we're doing? Do we need to have a newspaper article or a news story to actually show what we're doing? You know how many people that have the privilege of being able to do and are not doing? Because basically what we're saying in our communities are, we're not responsible for such and such not being able to make their way. Or as you said when you first started off, this gentleman that felt he was being disregarded or not being respected because he was eating his meal, and how dare you interrupt me while I'm eating? The same way as this young man that I talked about, who was 6 feet tall, and he's trying to make a living and help his parents out. People who have the means are saying, you need to go do this, this, and this, without even stopping to learn or to figure out what the story is. The same way that man shutting the homeless man off without finding out and getting the story of what's really going on. There's an accountability problem that we're having, and it starts with those people who have the actual ability to make a difference in our community. I'm not talking about the LeBron James and the Colin Kaepernicks and the Bill Gates and people who have those types of means. I'm talking about people in our communities who have the means, who are within our communities that can make a difference, that are standing on the side, waiting for somebody to cheer them in or bring them in or have a news story or make it something that is trendy or popular before they come in. That's the accountability that I'm talking about.
Victor Hugo is a quote, and the only reason I know this quote because Muhammad Ali. No, not Muhammad. It was Martin. I heard Martin Luther King use this quote, and it stuck with me. It's like one of my go-to quotes because I think it says a lot. And it says, "We know that sins will happen in the darkness. The guilty one is not the one who commits the sin, but the one who causes the darkness." And so that's the problem right there. Me, I'm always more interested. Yeah, I look at people, I see what they do, and sometimes again, some people out there make you want to pull your hair out. But I'm always asking myself, who caused the darkness? How did that person get there? Now, back to accountability, I think you were touching on something that I like to kind of like, I want to underscore. A lot of times we will say, you'll hear people say it all the time. Look, the only thing we got to do, everything starts in the home. Like let the parents raise their kids, and if that happens, then everything we'll be all good. And in some ways, that's an accurate statement. It's true, but it's unrealistic, right? We like if we look at this, if we examine our condition as a community, and we accept the fact that there are some kids being raised in some homes who won't get any of the things they need to grow up and be productive citizens, right? I mean, and sometimes it could just be in a literal way, like they just don't have parents or guardianship. So the question is, so what do we do about them? Because the problem, first of all, I'm gonna step back and say they are some remarkable people, and they are some people who live amongst us right now who have gone through the most dire circumstances and somehow come out on the other side like looking great, extremely wealthy and everything. And it's unfortunate that in our society, in our country, that's always proof positive that we don't need to do anything as a community. Look, this guy right here, he walked to school every day. He had no shoes. He went to bed hungry every night. Look at him now. He owned his own business and he's a millionaire. That's it. Proof anybody can do it. And I say, not so fast. So the question is, we talk about accountability, but when we talk about the young kids who don't have any of the guidance and leadership that they need to help to make them productive citizens, then what do we do about them? Do we just write them off? Do we just turn our head and look the other way and build more prisons? Right? No, absolutely not.
That we have. We also have to be careful in picking and choosing what story or what kid we think deserves to make it and what kid doesn't. And I'm gonna say that because you are correct, Chuck. There are a lot of organizations, there are a lot of people that are out there doing it. But I will only say, I'll only speak from personal experience. I have seen organizations that have come aboard and went out into the community and met some of these young men and brought them out. But I'm also leery because I've also witnessed the choices of the young men that they choose. And what I say is the young men that they choose may not necessarily be the ones who are greatly in need. They may be the ones that will have that story that we're so much talking about. Oh, I took this young man, we brought him in, he was from the projects, single family home, and we brought him into our organization, and we taught him how to tie a tie, and we taught him how to sit down and eat at a dinner table. We brought him a suit and some shoes, and we bring him to an event once or twice a year, and that young man is going to do great things. Well, that's not going to do great things for that young man, because most times those organizations have picked and chosen those people who they deem are going to be able to make it and that they can rehabilitate. Meanwhile, out of those 12 that are on the corner that we need to help, they've picked only 2 that can, that they think can make it, and the other 10 are just left there to try to fend for themselves. And so my choice in saying about accountability is the 10 that are left there or the 10 that we are accountable for. And when I say we, I'm talking about the village. I'm talking about exactly who we are. There used to be once in time that if you saw somebody in need, we didn't need to have a organization to organize it. We didn't need to have nobody put anything together. You just went out and made sure they're okay. If you saw a family that was in need of food, you didn't need to go to the food pantry or somewhere. You went in your own pantry and you got whatever you had that you could spare, You brought it over there and you just left it. You didn't need to have a accolade. You need to call them up and make a big to do out of it. You just went on and left it there and made sure that they needed, and then you kind of checked in from time to time and make sure things were okay. We've kind of lost that in our communities. We've lost the accountability of just being humans and just being showing humanity. Now it's more, instead about the cause, it's more about the applause. And so um, although I hold us accountable, and I'm saying us, myself, you, and others in the community accountable, I'm going to take it up a notch, and I'm going to say that we have a lot of organizations that get a lot of money in our communities. A lot of these organizations are funded through programs, federally, state, local, that are supposed to be helping in our communities. Those, take a moment, look at these programs in the city. I'm just going to put the city of New Orleans out there. Look at these programs. Look at the directors, how much they're being paid. Look at their board. Look at the amount of people that are on salary. How can you attest that you are going to be into the communities and helping out when majority of your funding goes to salary? Now, listen, I'm not saying by no means that these people who are out doing the work should not be funded or should not be able to get assistance or needed contributions. What I'm saying is, how are we supposed to be able to go into the community, hold these people accountable when we're seeing what they're making and what they're doing and how they're doing it, and they're helping the chosen few and throwing those few sprinkles out there, but the just of the monies is not going back into the communities that it's supposed to be given to. Tomorrow you have Give NOLA, which is a huge day to give into nonprofits and things that are in the community. Take a look at some of the nonprofits that are in the city. Take a look at some of the funding that goes into the city. Where is that money going? Look at the top to the bottom salaries. Look at how many of these organizations are getting money and what they're doing with it. I'm saying we as a community need to hold ourselves accountable first. Secondly, we have to hold those people that represent us responsible. Those are your leaders, community leaders, and your elected officials. Third, we have to hold these organizations that are supposed to be for our communities and into our communities responsible for what they're bringing into our communities. And fourth, we have to hold the people who get the majority of our money on Sundays, the clergy, the churches that are supposed to be the background, have always been the backbones in our community. We have to hold them responsible. Those are topics that people kind of shy away from because nobody really wants to step on any toes. But while we're not stepping on any toes, our children are being squashed. Our families are being stumbled upon. So my basic thing on accountability, without rambling further, is we've got to start addressing what we're not doing in our own communities. And then we've got to start holding those people who are on the next level accountable.
And I say there's one other part, one other thing that we're missing, and that is also holding ourselves accountable. And one of my buzzwords, the one I like to use quite often, is cognitive dissonance. Right? A lot of us are willing to live with that. So it's like, okay, you go to church on Sunday, and when you're in church, we're talking about love and community and respecting the neighbor and helping people who need help. And when the preacher says that, you amening and doing all of that. And then as soon as you walk out of the church, or as soon as you go to the job or go to the supermarket or go anywhere and you see somebody who needs help, you forget everything that you just got through from amen. And it's like, look, you over there, you got your problem. I ain't got nothing for you. It's like, for instance, I tell people, like with my business at Cafe Istanbul, nobody's never come there and I've treated them like a number. Nobody's never come there I've acted like, hey, listen, the only reason I need you here, give me your money. As soon as I get your money, I ain't got no more use for you. Get out of here. You know what I'm saying? And even if people don't say that all the time, it's just sometimes, when you do the money exchange, you feel that. It's like, oh, wow, I had this place from 8 until 10. And at 10 o'clock, this dude's already pushing me like out of the door. Well, the reason I don't act that way is because, I've been somewhat of an activist. I've been getting on my soapbox almost my entire life. And so I talk about community and the disparities and inequities that exist in our communities and how the haves and the have-nots. So how can I have a 30 or 40-year history of talking about these sort of things, and then I get my own business, and lo and behold, I run my business the same way every other capitalist run their business. It's about, I can't do it. I don't want to live with the cognitive dissonance, you see? And so I want to challenge people on that. When you talk about, what you bring to the community and the kind of person you want to be, and then don't just talk about it. And you got to realize that you can't speak community on one end, and then on the flip side, just act like a self-absorbed like capitalist. You can't do it. I'll give you one good example. Then I'm gonna hand it over to you, Lex.
Okay.
Man, the experience I've had with people in my business have been, I'd say, mostly really good. Over 95% of my experiences have been great. And I've had a few, less memorable interactions. And man, I had this lady who come there and I do stuff like the kind of things people never do. Say, well, I want to come early and clean up and do this and do that. Whatever. Tell me what time you want to be there. Well, you're going to be there at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. Here's the key. You can do whatever it is you want to do. And then when you finish, call me. Now, I knew this lady's husband. I didn't know her at all, but I'm starting off with trust. I'm not just assuming, well, if I give you my key and you're in my business, you're going to steal everything from me. I give her the key. And they actually had, of all things, a Kwanzaa celebration. And it was beautiful. And everybody was on stage talking about community and love and this and that. I was like, wow, love it, right? So at the end of the day, they got to pay me after the fact. I let them pay after the show. They have the show, then they come see me. And the lady who worked for her, my printer was down. And she said, I said, okay, so she comes to settle up. She said, well, where's the invoice? I said, well, I'll tell you what, just give me the money and I'll just send you the invoice tomorrow. And she looked at me and said, that's not how you do business. I was like, I'm flat. I'm like, wow. So I've trusted you with my entire business. And you've been on stage talking about love and community and all of this sort of stuff. And now the show's over. And the only thing that has to be done is you pay me. But you don't even trust me when I say I'll send you an invoice tomorrow. So on one hand, it's been all trust and love and community on my end. But on your end, it shows that all that stuff you was talking about on stage was just talk. Like you don't really, you can't mean it, because somebody who's just trusted you with their entire business, you can't even trust that the person will say they're going to send you an invoice tomorrow and that they're going to follow through on that. So that I hope I didn't go too far off on the tangent, but I just wanted to share that. It goes back to the cognitive dissonance, how people could say one thing, but they don't really mean it. They're just talking. They don't really mean it.
Well, you know what, too, Chuck? Do you think that we've become we've become this far in society? I'll go back, and I'm going way back. I'm going back to pre-50s. Pre-60s. I'll start off in the early 60s. Mm-hmm. When we were a village, and I say a village because I use that as a term, not as endearment. I just use it as a term because that's what we once were. When we were a village, there was a certain amount of action. Less talk, more action. We can go back and we can go through the history of this country as far as our villages. And we can talk about and see where we've come and how far we've come. And I'll share this with you. I sat down with an older lady at the Arthur Mundy Center about 3 weeks ago. Things are just starting to come back to normal. People are just starting to come in. And she's 87 years old. And she said something to me that made me sit down and think for a moment. And she said, y'all young people. Now, you know, I'm not considering myself too young, but I'm young enough for her to call me a young people. And she said, y'all young people have taken our communities and y'all have lost the meaning of what the communities are. Y'all don't know how to work together. Y'all say one thing and do another. Y'all talk a lot of noise without a lot of action. And y'all have forgotten exactly what you're supposed to be doing in the community because y'all are falling over each other, trying to come up with solutions when the problems have never changed. And I just kind of sat there for a second, and you know, because she was, I mean, she knows I'm in the community, but she was not holding back or holding any punches back. In other words, she was saying y'all. When she says y'all, she's not just pointing out one person; she's saying everybody. And so her point was, what are y'all going to do to change the perception of where we are because we're going backwards. She said we're going backwards. We on a incline and we're going backwards. We're not climbing, we're going backwards. And she said so many of y'all have made it and forgotten the path that brought y'all to where y'all got to, and now y'all are forgetting from whence you came. And I just sat there for a few minutes to kind of just ponder, you know, because to me, the elders always know and you respect them and you let them say what they have to say. But her point was, it's so many people out there with a mission and with a lot of words they say and a lot of things they want to do. But she has seen over her time, and respectfully, she's in her 80s, late 80s. And she said back in the day, we didn't meet about it. We didn't talk about it. We didn't plan about it. We did it. And so
Hmm.
I'm wondering if we're spending too much time planning and organizing and meeting and strategizing and not enough action. What do you
Yeah,
think?
yeah, I kind of disagree. I respectfully disagree with the elder. I'm going to say sometimes I think the sort of things that do happen today that sometimes they're overlooked. Like you hear people say all the time, "I ain't going to no more protests. I ain't doing this. I ain't doing that. The only thing we do, we get out there and we sing a chant or whatever, and nothing ever happens." Well, I say not so fast. I say when you look at the criminal justice reform that's been happening um, in the city of New Orleans, I'm sure it's been happening in cities all over this country on a local, state, and federal level. If when all of these unarmed black men had been getting shot by the police and the police been getting off and stuff like that, if they didn't, people ain't go out in the streets and start burning stuff down, right, and just bringing a lot of attention to that. If Michelle Alexander didn't write the new Jim Crow, if Ava DuVernay didn't write the documentary 13, I think it would have been the same kind of stuff that you saw happen in the 60s when Negroes getting killed but for the last 400 years. And it's like, well, that's why we got jails. You know what I'm saying? But people let it be known that no, we're not happy with this. And we're not going to stand by and let this happen, black and white and other. And so if it were not for people like that,
But
then I
respect
think
in hers, because and I guess I should have started off with that disclaimer. She wasn't speaking about the actions in the streets. She was talking about our communities. And when I say that, because we were talking, it was election time, it was things going on. And so she was talking about the Negroes who have made it, is was her conversation. And so I'm using her verbs and her words because this is how she was speaking to me. So in respect, if I'm gonna tell her story, I'm gonna tell it in her words.
but
So
but but
Mark
but you know
her
but
and
but there's certainly some self-absorbed people who are not interested in anything, you know outside of the bottom line in their bank account.
right.
Those people exist, but those people have always been here.
Yeah,
They've always been around.
but you know, respectfully, I said I was going to talk about it on the show because some of what she said kind of stuck with me. And it was the fact that she sees a lot of talk. She wasn't talking about the protest per se, because she thinks that the best thing that happened was the ability to have these phones, as she told me, that have a camera on them. Because if they had a phone with a camera on them back in the day, she feels like things would have been changed. And if they had more people who were in office that could speak on it without fear of death, she thinks that that's a
She's,
positive.
yeah,
Um,
she's probably right. She's
she,
probably right.
her point was is that we have people right here in our community that have forgotten from whence they came. And you're right. We had that conversation. It's always happened. It's always been that way. She speaks on the fact that there are certain people in our communities that are going to get more of a voice than others, just because of their looks and whatever. And that's another show for us. But basically, what she was saying is that there are people who are in a position to be able to do more and aren't doing more, and nobody's holding them accountable to do more, because it's the same old thing that we say, oh, well, it's always been that way, there's always been those, and it's always been. She said, when do we stop saying there's always been those and blah blah, when we know who they are, and we just go on ahead and just pacify it by just saying, well, it's always been that way. It's kind of like what she said to me is lynching's always been that way, but it didn't change until we started to make change and hold folks accountable. um,
Mm-hmm.
and so what she was saying is, when are y'all, when she was saying, again, I'll say to y'all because she was talking to me also, when are y'all going to start holding those people accountable that y'all know in your own communities that have used the backs of those that they've climbed over and climbed on, to to be able to be successful and have not given back anything in return? What are those people being held accountable for? And so, we won elected officials at that time, and she went from elected officials to just average everyday citizen, and then she really went into the clergy. That's a whole nother show. But
Mm-hmm.
her point was, in just saying it, touching on it, the clergy has been the background of the community for a very long time, and the clergy has not suffered um, in the community for a very long time. And in some places, the clergy has come up and has done significantly well. And so her point was, if all we do is praise when little things happen, and we're not holding those officials and those clergy and those people within our community, our leaders, accountable to what needs to be done, then how can we expect John Q. Citizen to be held accountable within their own streets or their own neighborhoods? And that's, I want to kind of touch on that to see what your thoughts are on those statements, and what do you think about that?
No, I certainly agree with that. There's you won't get any argument from me on that one. I mean, we have to hold people accountable. We have to hold ourselves accountable. And I think, Lex, while you were talking, and one thing I was saying to myself is that the 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 trust thing is very, very important, because I mean, give you an example. In Kwame Toure's autobiography, Ready for Revolution, he said, when he came down to working in Mississippi in the 1960s, that wow, he loved being in the Mississippi Delta in the 60s, because he was around these black folk there, and it was about like community, and it was like it reminded him, I guess maybe he was romanticizing it somewhat, but he thought it was like some of that leftover stuff from the African village, the way people in the Mississippi Delta interacted with each other, and he loved that, right? And he thought to himself, well, he's from Trinidad originally, but he left Trinidad when he was 11, and he was basically raised in New York City. And so what is so different about like New York City? What does it do to people? Why are the people there so different than the people in the Mississippi Delta, the black people there? And he said, I thought to myself, all of the people in New York City, they're only a few generations removed, 1 or 2 generations removed from rural Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina.
Right.
And so, he assumed that, if he would have ran into their communities before they got to New York City, that it would have been the landscape would have been different, right? And so he realized, what is it about this American culture that changes people, that robs us out of that sort of community thing. And I'm gonna say, and I don't know, but I started off by talking about trust. I know that that's sort of one thing that now we all become urbanized and influenced by television and stuff like that. And trust is a hard thing. Sometimes a brother will come, somebody come and they need help, or but you don't know if you can even trust this person. In fact, you might not even get a chance to talk to the person because you might close the door before they get off the first step. The first step towards your house. And so if we don't have trust, then that makes it difficult. And I will say that, I'm not the biggest guy, but I grew up kind of rough. And so since I'm not the smallest guy, I can afford to trust somebody. And if they betray my trust, I always feel like I have the capacity to straighten the thing out. But if I was just physically just a smaller person and I didn't have that physical strength, then I guess you could still trust people, but it could end up being costly. So I just want to say that that's something that we have to consider as well. But if the trust is not there, then it makes everything else really, really difficult. Lex, what do you think?
I think you're right. I think we've lost trust, and it's hard to trust people, especially these days. I've seen, not to go biblical, but I've seen exactly what has been said in biblical terms over the years. Here of late, in the last couple of years, you see something I never thought I'd see before. I've seen brother against brother, sister against sister, niece against cousin. Just it's hard to trust when you see people who are in the same families. This isn't even strangers. These are people in the same families that are having trust issues within their own confines, places that I never thought I would ever see issues of trust. We're talking, being able somebody coming to the door or somebody in business, and I've witnessed with my own eyes families that are having these trust issues. So I think you're right. We've really gotten away from being able to trust people. We've got away from being able to trust people. We've gotten away from being able to trust the media. We've gotten away from being able to trust just capacities that we probably took for granted that we would probably not have an issue with, that we're having problems with now. And once the trust is gone, that's hard to build. For me, I don't know about you, Chuck, but for me, I have a problem with working that trust. When somebody betrays that trust, it's hard for me to come back from that. I consider myself a strong person. I definitely have traveled a road that has probably caused me to have questions and question people, but I consider myself to be a stronger individual. And so when I look at the fact that I have issues with giving people maybe a second chance, or trying to go to the table and diffuse an issue that has caused a trust problem, then I have to also hold myself accountable for having those trust issues. I don't know if you've ever come against that.
Oh no, it's a process. I grew up in a neighborhood up in Carrollton called Pigeon Town. And I remember I ran across one of the brothers who I grew up with. In fact, he has a brother that's a couple years younger than him, and we were best friends in like elementary school, right? And he was living. Maybe he was just got through from being incarcerated, and he was living in a homeless shelter. And he asked me to give him a ride to the shelter, which I did. And while I was riding him to the shelter, he was just telling me, man, Chuck, it's a shame, man. I got all of this family here in New Orleans, and I can't stay. Nobody let me stay at their house. I got to stay at this homeless shelter. And I told him, I said, listen, James, I said, man, where you are right now, we didn't just get here overnight. And I hadn't had that much dealing with him in like the last 30 years, but I know the story, right? I know the story. And I just told him, I said, if your family feel that way about you, brother, then you done did a whole lot of stuff to get them there, right? And so you don't just show up and say, okay, I'm here and I'm a changed man. You can count on that.
Right.
It don't happen that way, right? It took a long time to get them all to the point where they was like, look, you know, we can't have you around us right now. It took a long time for that. And now you're going to have to prove to your family that you are changed. And it's not going to just happen overnight. It's going to be with time. And you're going to have to put in the work, bro. That's how it happens.
I think, you know, when we talk about that trust, it's also at a point where you kind of think to yourself, where do we go from here? Like that, the person you're talking about, now he's at a homeless shelter. There's two sides to look at that. Some people will look at it like, that's a shame his family has got him living at that homeless shelter. And then people who know him will say, yeah, but at another point, we know why he's in the homeless shelter, because he didn't stole from A, B, C, D, E, and F.
Right. Like I said, I didn't know any of that to be certain, but I know black people.
Everybody,
right, bro. It's like people ain't gonna just close their door on you just because they want to see you suffer. They want to see you die out in the street or something like that. If your whole family's closing their door on you, then you got to think, what did you do to cause that?
Yeah, and do you think, Chuck, and maybe this is just this is not on the accountability subject, but you just said something that touched on something for me. Do you think that we are one, and that's generalizing, I guess you'd say, but I think it's a true fact to some. We are some of the most forgiving people when it comes to holding folks accountable. We are when I say that, I mean our villages, not all, but some of them. We will give opportunities after opportunities until we sometimes have gotten shot in the foot, as they say, and still continue to give that help and that assistance, even after. I think that comes from years of us being maybe not treated the best, and so we recognize that in each other, and we give maybe a benefit of doubt that maybe others don't. Do you find that?
You know, I got to say that I hear people say that all the time, especially, you know, it's like, you know, if in the case of, you know, street level crime, if somehow one of us has been victimized by a white person, like the guy who shot the 9 people in the church in South Carolina. Right. You know, there's some people who will say, well, I forgive this man. And yeah, and a lot of black people are upset by that. We're too doggone forgiving. But it goes back to the word I used earlier, the term I used earlier, the cognitive dissonance.
Yep.
If black people, if you go to church every Sunday and you study in the Bible, and the Bible is constantly talking about forgiveness, like Jesus Christ kind of like left that for us, you know, you got to be able to forgive, right? And so if black people if you are Christian and you do find it possible to forgive people in the most dire circumstance, then I can't be mad at you for that, because that's what the Bible says you should be doing.
Right. And I think that that's not so because there are certain things that have been indoctrinated in us that we have failed to recognize, and certain things that have made us be at a point where we are, to where we perhaps are doing things that we haven't thought about, that have kind of just come into place because we've been taught that. It's something that we have learned, whether it be in Christian, in our Christian background or in our own households. It's something that we have been taught, sort of like that whole, you know, privacy thing, things that happen in our households or in our community. We've been taught that we don't talk about it. We don't say anything about it. We're not supposed to talk about it. So I kind of think that there's a whole lot of things that we have done we've been indoctrinated, and that has kind of placed a difference in our households and in our mindset. That cognitive you talked about goes a lot deeper than just some of the things we've touched on tonight. Um,
Mhm.
so, but I truly think that some of the things that's been indoctrinated into us over the years, and I say us, I mean all the way back to, the Bible, what we learned on the plantation, what we've been taught as slaves. Um, I'm not necessarily those people to subscribe to the crab in the barrels wording. Mentality wise, I think it was set in place. You have to think about it. We kind of had a whole level of it. You out on the field. You didn't want to be in the field, so maybe you wanted to get to the house, and in order to get to the house, you had to do whatever you had to do to get to the house. And if you got in the house, you wanted to be the person to drive around the car. I think it's just a mindset in its years of things being indoctrinated in us that is going to take a while to get it out. Should I say minimize? I'm not sure we can get it out, but I think we can minimize some of the damage. And I don't know. What do you think about that, Chuck? You think we have a lot of indoctrinating because just like you talked about with the forgiving, um, I'm not saying. Um, I had one of the guys who was with EJIA, Charles Brand, who served 37 years in prison, and when he came out, he said, I don't hold any ill will and I forgive. And that was hard for me because, you know, there was two sides to that. First of all, I said to myself, how can I be upset? Because this man is the person that served the time. So I can't be mad if he's not mad. But then on the other side of that, I said it was a lie that sent you to prison and you served 37 years. You missed your mama died, your dad died, your brother died, your child grew up. When you went to prison, the child was 3 months old. Now she's got grandkids, you got great grandkids. How can you not be mad at that? And I asked him, I said, Mr. Charles, how are you not mad, furious, wanting to do something bad? And he said, baby, I have spent so much time being angry. I've spent so much time being mad that now I have this opportunity. I'm not going to waste it.
See, and that's what I was thinking. While you were telling the story, you see, some people will say, "Oh my God, man, you gotta be mad." But in some ways, Mr. Charles figured out how to liberate himself because he's not gonna live forever. 37 years of his life has already been forfeited, and so however much time he has left, I mean, he could choose to spend it while he's drowning in anger, or he could. And this is a big thing because I don't know if I have the capacity to do that. I would probably be more like you, Lex, but he has liberated himself, and if because there's no way he's going to be able to go back and to change it. And if being angry, if being mad could change that, then it's time to blow your top, baby. But it doesn't matter. He won't be able to change that. But whatever time he has left, if he spends the remaining years, his remaining years on earth, angry and mad and upset, then it's going to rob him of what life he has remaining. That's what I think.
Yeah, and he said it as much. I just couldn't. He was holding his Bible, and and he was like, well, the Lord teaches us, and he was like, I've been in prison, and I read my Bible, and I go to church, and I do all this, and I got it, and he's like, I got a second chance, and the person who had told the lie was, you know, has gone on to live a flourished life, and did so. I had to check myself, is what I'm saying, because I had such anger for him, and he had no anger. At least he didn't visibly show it. And
Mhm.
I asked about it. It was very, very. It wasn't a second thought. I forgive them. That is something they're going to have to face in life, and they're going to have to meet their maker and do, and I understood every word he said, but he was, quoting scripture and what he had learned while he was in prison, and what the Bible had taught him and what the Lord said, and that is what he used to form his opinion about his forgiveness. And meanwhile, I just, continue to look at the faces of these people at the trial back then, and the ability to sit on the stand with a straight face and tears and, all this, and saying the guilt of this person that you knew at that time was totally innocent. And you lived 37 years on this earth, every day waking up knowing that you sent a man to prison that was innocent, and you were okay with that. And you the same person that was in church every Sunday. The same Sundays that he was in prison, opening his Bible behind doors that were locked, that he could not get out of, and he was innocent, and he knew it every day. You were in that same church, opening that same Bible, reading those same scriptures, knowing that you sent somebody to prison 37 years, and you worshiping and praising the Lord, the same God, y'all in the same situation on Sundays reading. But your ability to read that Bible and his ability to read that Bible is obviously two different versions. Because at no point in those 37 years of you reading that Bible did you ever have that epiphany that this man is in this prison because of a lie I told, and I need to go over here and ask for forgiveness, and then I need to make sure that he's out of here. At no point in the 37 years.
I slightly disagree. One thing you said is that on one hand, I do see how it could be liberating for the brother to forgive and get on with his life and live, try to find some joy in his remaining years. But the thing I disagree with you said, just because he ain't mad don't mean that we still can't be mad for him.
I was still mad, Chuck. I was still mad. I just was respecting his peace. So that I was in his presence, I respected his peace. I didn't have, I'm not even gonna lie or try to say, oh, woe is me. When he told me how he felt, I felt him. No, I did not. I didn't understand it. I still don't understand it. Because again, as I stressed, for 37 years, you woke up behind all that man had when he went, not that man, Mr. Charles, because I'm calling by his name. All Mr. Charles had when he went to prison was a speeding ticket and a speeding ticket and a ticket for something jaywalking, something like, it was two bogus tickets that it was, and somebody said rape, and because of the time they were living in, he served 37 years in jail.
And Lex, I gotta say this. You see, like if we look at this is like a personal something happened to this man in person, right? And so of course any reasonable, decent thinking person will hear this and be upset about it, and we should be upset about it. But the reality is, let's look about the mass incarceration institution, right? Where it's not a situation where this is a one-off, where this one thing happened to this one individual. There are literally tens of thousands of stories just like that. Now, just here in New Orleans recently, a man was let out of prison, and he had been in Angola for the last 20 years. Because he walked in Rubenstein Brothers and had the audacity to steal 2 shirts that wasn't worth $500. And that was enough to send him to prison for over 20 years, right? And so that's problematic. Now, it goes back, bringing it full circle, goes back to, what we said a little earlier, that we've seen a lot of we've seen a lot of improvement in the whole criminal justice reform thing. There are a lot of people coming home. We're starting to realize that the whole multi-billing thing is, just saying 3 strikes you out, recall, even if you get, 3, non-violent crimes, we realize that to forfeit somebody's life over something like that, that we can't be that kind of society. So I just want to say that we have been making a lot of improvements in that area.
Yes, we have. We just need to figure out a way to facilitate our people when they come out. One of the things that we do, just with our organization at the Maze 5, is we go out into the community and we meet them where they are. We're not the ones that's out with the homeless mission under the bridge and all that, because there are more homeless people than are under the bridge. They're in neighborhoods, they're in streets, they're in the ninth ward, they're in the seventh ward, they're everywhere. And a lot of them we come across are people who are in the penal system. And, they don't give you, there's nothing. A lot of people think there's so many programs. Oh, they get out, they give them some clothes, they give them some this, that they can go to this place and they can get some help and go. That's not true. And so we're finding a lot of mechanisms that or loopholes that we got to try to figure out how to do better. And so that's one of the things that we've been trying in meeting people where they are, is trying to help these brothers and sisters who are out on the street, who or don't have a place to go, kind of like your friend who you say that, well, the guy you grew up with who was in the homeless shelter. Well, a lot of these people don't want to go to homeless shelter. A lot of them are out on the streets, not by choice, but by their situation. But we come across a lot of them, and one of the things that we're trying to do is to try to enable or facilitate a way to be able to assist them in going from that transition from being incarcerated to now coming into normal society, that 20, 30 years, they come out to a whole different world. This is, we're just free and we come out, they come out to a whole different world. And every circumstance is different. So we're meeting not only, we have our veterans, that's a whole different story, but we also have now the incarcerated. I've been at this for 7 years now, and I never came across as many former incarcerated people as I'm coming across in the past 2 years. And so I know there's a problem. We've always had our veterans. We've always assisted our veterans. We've always had veterans out there. We've done a horrible job in this country of taking care of the men and women who have defended us, and we've thrown them out to the wolves. And I will be on my soapbox every day about that. We have failed our veterans. But now we're finding another problem when we're going out on the streets, that we have a lot of our former incarcerated brothers and sisters who are on the streets. And it's a different story on a whole nother level. A lot of our veterans, we could eventually get them their rights. We eventually get them their Social Security and things like that. But the former incarcerated people who may have a felony, they can't get a job. Everybody likes to tell the story of the guy who made it. We see all the stories about this person was formerly incarcerated, became an attorney, or became this or became that. But we actually hear and see the stories of the people who have just been lost in the paperwork, lost in the ability to find assistance. And so I'm hoping that from the point that people are released, that their stories don't end just in a release, that we got to do a lot more besides celebrating the fact that they are now out and they can do better. Like Mr. Charles, when he got out, he was welcomed by his family. He had a support system. They were there. They took him. He was, able to get back into society slowly but surely. But Pamela and Ed, who are out on the street, who don't have that capability, are just kind of thrown out. And so we know that it takes more than one person, but one person can start to make a difference. And so it kind of goes back to what you were saying about that trust. I think that we have to start trusting a little bit more. And I've had to work on that with myself. Knowing that I can go home to my house and get in my bed with my electricity and my water. I've had to check myself a couple of times when I've been out there, so that I understand and remain understanding of the fact that Ed and Pam can't do the same thing. So I don't know all the answers, Chuck, but I know there's more questions than answers. And so I know when we talk about accountability, we start on one thing, but there's so much accountability to go around. Start with yourself. I know that I, as a person, have to do a little bit more in the community to make sure that the people like Mr. Ed and Miss Pam have more consistency when they come out, and they're not just thrown to the wolves. And getting out on the street is a lot of distractions out there for them. So I guess I'd like to on our accountability that we've got to start doing a lot more. And I've been holding myself, my feet to the fire a little bit more. And I'm hoping that everybody else will take a little bit of time to just hold themselves to the fire, look in the mirror a little more, and look around your town and see if you're doing everything that you think you can be doing, and kind of hold yourself a little bit more accountable than you've been doing previously.
Lex, well, I'll tell you what, that was well stated. I don't need to add nothing else to it. I always have such a great time being on here with you. It's the Village Line, the Breadcrumbs, and I look forward to seeing you again on the first Monday of next month.
Yes, sir. And great greetings with Cafe Istanbul. I gotta just say it. I've been there before. We've laid the breadcrumbs down there, and so I've got to say that continue doing what you're doing, because it's an outstanding place for not just for people to go and enjoy, but it's also fellowship and it's community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lex. I appreciate it.
You have a good one. Thanks, Chuck.
All right. I'll see y'all next month.
Yes, next month. You have a great one. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, bye.